Okay, fantastic. So, hi everybody. So Sue asked me not so long ago whether I would be up for doing a session. And before we go into a little bit more details on that, it might be helpful for us to introduce who Sue and I are to each other, as we come from quite different worlds. And so for the past, I would say, 6-ish years, Sue and I have been meeting very consistently, and we are both very much solution-focused practitioners and solution-focused thinkers. But we've become reflection partners in a way, witnesses to each other's journeys. Sometimes we're co-working partners. Sometimes we are peer coaches. Sometimes we're just the thought reflection board, the person to think out loud at, and definitely neurodivergent or neurospicy co-vibers. Sometimes we just hang out, and we're friends. Apart from my family, Stu has been the most consistent social contact that I've had in the past 6 years, by far. So how did we get here? Sue, take us through what we're doing and how we got here.
How we got here? What, to this session, to this point in time?
To this and what it is, exactly.
Apart from, oh, Guy is here as well. Hooray, fantastic. Sorry, I'm getting so excited. But okay, so hands up, I have ADHD. Okay, I get easily distracted. I'm loving that my brain is trying to admit people and get excited about who's turning up and remember to speak about what we're here for. Okay, have I let them all in? Cool. So, yeah, well, Amici, as she said, we met, and then because we're not researchers.
I'll admit everybody else while you're talking.
Yeah, you admit everybody else. Yeah, good, you do that. So I will hands up. I'm not a researcher, and I love being surrounded by academics because they do all the hard work, so I don't have to. So Amici and I have done this very scientific experiment. Okay, we have an N of 2. It's Amici and me. And this experiment has been going on for 6 years now. And our control is that 3 years, when 3 years happened, when we didn't know that we had ADHD. And then we had this enlightenment. And then we've had 3 years with it. And it's interesting. So it's the contrast between the before BADHD and the after ADHD or with ADHD. And this is a topic, so it's partly informed our conversations ongoing because we've learned how to live life with different lenses as well, and with frames that are accepting and validating. And so we're curious because we know that the SF police also might come and get us. We're curious to explore what happens if you use the diagnosis word in an SF conversation to be controversial, and is it ever valid? So I could share the screen, or should I just talk about what we're going to talk about? Should I? What do you think
about what we're going to talk about?
Okay, so that's why this topic is relevant to us. We're interested, and apparently at least 35 or 33 other people are interested too. One of them being Amici's mum. So this is really good. So we want to have here in this conversation in the next 49 minutes, a conversation about interesting things that we're fascinated by, and we'd love you to join us. We will have to set up breakout rooms, and conversations about why it's important. We're talking, the questions we're asking are, does having an awareness that brains work differently help us to be more effective as SF practitioners? And what would make diagnosis a dirty word in an understanding of brain differences? Is it a dirty word or not? And for those of you that are not native English speakers and who don't know what we mean, when something's a dirty word, it's like a swear word. It's not allowed in the polite conversation. we're happy to talk about how we think diagnosis might help and look at productive ways to bring it into conversations. And we do want to have a conversation. It's not a presentation. And we've yet to work out how we're going to do that with the breakout rooms. So does that kind of capture where we are so far? That was our best hopes. So perhaps you can, because there's quite a lot of us, perhaps you can throw some in the chat. What would be your best hopes? How would you know that spending this bit of time with us has been valuable, helpful, interesting, or useful to you in some way?
Yeah, you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourselves. I want to add one of my best hopes is just connecting with other people that are interested in neurospiciness and solution focus. But you can, yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves and.
Cool. Yes.
All right. Yeah.
This with solution focus, meaning ADHD or any of the spectrum disorders.
Thanks, Liz.
Say, as somebody with also recently discovered neurospiciness, I'm just really interested, and somebody who's passionate about SF, I'm just really interested to see how the two fit together. So,
Gaia, so good to see you.
nice to see you too, Sue.
Wait, I need to change this to speaker because I'm struggling to find people. There we go. Cool.
Okay, I'm going to read out some of the comments in the chat. So much still to learn and love the perspective from neurodiversity. Another best hope is to learn how to adapt my approach to clients with ADHD. Someone else here, Shima, her daughter's ADHD and finds it fascinating. Always like to learn more about it and how she can support. Increase playfulness. Oh, yes, please. Increase playfulness when it comes to the neurospicy experience with the loved ones, better understand this topic, both personally and with clients. What works when I'm working with clients with ADHD. Awesome. Fantastic. This is really cool. And help people decide if formal diagnosis is something that they want to pursue. Yes, very fair enough. Fair enough. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing some of those best hopes. I hope I didn't miss any. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Amici. Okay. Right. So I am just going to try and share my screen because if I can find the right map, let's share this. What can you see? Okay. Cool. Can you see in my map? I've completely lost sight of everybody here now.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Okay.
Yes.
So, how are we going to do this? We've got all of these people. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to put that in gallery mode. Okay. So that's the session structure. So we've got kind of 4 main questions. Does having awareness that brains work differently help us to be more effective as practitioners? And of course, the SF general stance doesn't tend to use diagnosis. It's independent of, it doesn't matter. People, Steve always used to answer the question, people say, does it work with this? Does it work with that? And he'd say, I don't know, because it's not about working with a condition. And often the phrase that's used is what's happening between the noses, not what's happening between the ears. So we're not analyzing and diagnosing and sorting out what's going on in people's heads. So it's systemic in what's between the noses and in the interaction. But our sort of question is, how might recognizing that what's between the ears makes a difference to what happens between the noses? Yeah, and we think it does. So I don't know what I've done with the rest of this map. Amici.
It's in my head. It's okay. I think it might help to start with what would make it a dirty word, right? Because we've both grappled with this quite a bit, especially when it started to be something that we both were exploring and it started to be relevant and become a bit more centered. are we allowed? Is it useful? Is this a question that, as true as FS, we're allowed to ask, kind of thing? And of course, it's not as black and white, but what some of the points of views that we explored and arrived at as well, if it is seen as a bad thing, right? Like if I have a diagnosis and I see it as something limiting me, or something that might seem like a reason for, well, does it work with X or does it work with Y? I might not, as a solution-focused practitioner, consider it relevant, or maybe even not helpful. But if we see ADHD, autism, any other neurodivergence as especially with ADHD and autism as a neurotype, as in a brain style. This is just how my brain works. It's not really a disorder. Because it's not a disorder in all contexts. It's just in certain situations or in certain demands, with certain demands, it doesn't, certain things don't work in the same way. Whoops. If I see this as a part of my identity, part of how my brain works, this is just part of who I am, just how my name is part of who I am, and what I like is part of who I am, and it's just part of my amichiness, then why can't, could it not be a really useful thing to be aware of and make part of the therapy? Because if I'm thinking of the kinds of questions that we might ask about, I might ask someone about, to get to know their context, who are the people that they live with, to get an idea of who's in their family, who are their VIPs. That's relevant to who they are. I might ask them what they do for fun or what they do for a living. That's relevant to who they are and to their context. So asking, okay, so what, how does is there anything about your brain that works differently, or that is also relevant to who they are, especially if, or maybe relevant to who they are, especially if I'm not in any way seeing that as a limitation or as a label, but simply, oh, okay, so, what's your vibe? How does your brain work? Is that part of your identity, perhaps? Because for many people, it is. And I would argue, and I'm not speaking for, hopefully not speaking out of turn, but definitely not intending to speak for anyone else, but for us, for Sue and myself, this has become a big part of how we see ourselves and how the thinking, and not in a bad way, but more in a, oh yeah, cool, I'll need to do it this way for it to work. And in that way, it's been the opposite of putting on a label. It's been kind of like an opening of a box that didn't fit, and then a permission to look at solutions that weren't in that box to begin with, and that might have been floating around. Sue, what would you add? You're muted. Sue, you're muted.
I need myself to be efficient. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Yes. So what I was going to say was, as many of the comments here, it's we talk about where is the pathology. If we see it as being a limiting thing, if it's a thing between the ears, if it's an individual issue, then we have a problem, we have an impairment. And if it's a societal issue, a contextual issue, as many people have said here, it's not an issue. It's not even a linear thing, divergence. There's like normative, the kind of classic bell curve thing is, you've got this linear, If most people are in the middle, and then some are at this end and some are at this end. It's not even linear. It's a whole multi-spectrum thing. And if we were to welcome all of that as being part of the system, and as Gaia says here, the issues come from society, as in there's nothing wrong with anybody. It's just that things are different, and if it creates limiting assumptions or tries to put people through tubes. And as somebody said here, it might be a dirty word when you have to work through all the beliefs. So it's just that society associates with the label. So neurodiversity pride, yeah. And which metaphor was that? Love that metaphor, yeah. So do we want people to have a conversation yet? Or should we just add one more thing, and then we can send people off to have a conversation?
Add one more thing.
Yeah, yes. I think so. So you know, if we don't, so for example, it's really sunny this week, okay, and I've been loving being out in the sunshine. I've been away this week, and I've been walking in the Peak District, and I can go out in the sunshine and I can put some sunscreen on, but somebody with red hair and pale skin, and all their family of kids with red hair and pale skin that I saw, they're all covered with hats and things. I don't think that they are, you know, not appropriate. This is a stupid metaphor. It's not going the right place, but you know, it's not that there's anything wrong with them. They just can't tolerate sun in the same way that I can, and therefore, you know, they need to go around with their umbrellas and their hats and everything else. So it's the neutral info. And figuring out how you show up in the world. And there's a lovely quote from I got it off ADHD UK, actually. It's an analogy some of you may have seen about when we see a label as being helpful or a dirty word. And it's a quote: "Why do you need a label? Because there is comfort in knowing that you are a normal zebra, not a strange horse. Because you can't find a community of other zebras, and you can't learn what makes a zebra thrive, what brings you, a zebra, joy, if you don't know that you're a zebra and you are learning solely from horses. It's near impossible to be happy and mentally healthy if you're spending all your life thinking you're a failed horse, having others tell you you are a failed horse, ouch, had that plenty, when all along you could be thriving and understood if everyone, including you, just knew you were a zebra." So
yeah, I love. I always love that, because it's so to the point, right? And so wrapping that into our discussion, if we're seeing diagnosis or identification, neurotype identification, if we want to take the label off, as openly talking about or acknowledging that this is a zebra, that this person's a zebra, and that's part of who they are, rather than something that limits them, then could that not be compatible? Could that not be in fact not only not a dirty word, but actually a really, really helpful part of it? You've put it in. Thank you, Sue. All right. So someone was asking where that was from. It's all in Sue's put it in the chat. Okay.
all right, where are we up to? Where are we going next?
Let's talk.
Chat about it. What do you think?
Yes. The main point is really, if we're seeing diagnosis as neutral, value neutral information, just like, you know, questions about family, if they have that, questions about other aspects of their life, then aren't we, by being, okay, don't shout at me, but by being such sticklers for, no, this is value, we don't include diagnoses, aren't we then potentially part of the problem, because we are assuming that diagnosis comes with a, you know, is a problem, versus, oh, okay, here's another piece of neutral information you've given me about you, that is useful to know, because maybe we, and that's what we're trying to figure out. Maybe we ask questions in a certain way. Maybe we adjust the session a little bit, if that's helpful. And I might, as a practitioner, I might not know that that will be useful. Or perhaps as a practitioner, it doesn't matter. I don't know. That's part of what we're discussing overall. Anyway, yeah.
Cool. And there's one other thing I want to add into this, which was last year at the SF24, Adam Froer and Mia Lunder and Rachel Gillibrand did a session where they looked at what happens in the client's brains, and they use an EEG machine, where you put on electrodes. And there was a SF watch party last, I don't know, March or April, the SF watch party discussed this. And during it, Adam was there, Adam Froer was there saying about, he was watching the neuroimaging on the screen as these people were being asked questions. And most neurotypical people, brains followed a certain pattern of where where it was lighting up, the order that things went in, such that he was able to get to a point where he could predict when they were going to answer the question from the pattern of neuroactivity. And in this group of people, I think it was 12 altogether, and they had one person with autism and one person with ADHD. And both of those two had very different brain patternings showing up on the screen. The person with autism, I can't remember the detail of it. It was which side it was, but it was all seemed to be very logical, but it didn't mean that, but also the emotional side was showing up. The person with ADHD, instead of kind of having things going in order, everything lit up all of the time, all of the colors. And it seemed to be that people needed to have longer to talk it out, get it out on the outside. And that's certainly my experience. And I talk about my brain, one of the metaphors I use is that it's like having spaghetti and fireworks in there. Everything's all connected to everything all the time going off. And I can't necessarily control what I'm going to have going off and what's connected in the attention. So that's kind of a validating thing to know that actual real scientists in this community have proven that there are different ways of showing up on, neuroimaging, EEG activity, electro, and I can't remember the word. So it's basically, that's just to say it's not made up. Okay, there are differences in how things function between the ears that do impact on how things come out between the noses and how we interact between the noses. So, Amici, what's the question? Are we sending off people to discuss I'm trying to follow messages as well. So, I mean, we can talk about our experience, but I'd rather you talked about a bit about your experience now and thinking about how it might apply. So what are the questions we're sending off to ask? What would you like to be discussing in your breakout groups?
No, I'm muted. Yes, feel free to share in the chat if you have any particular things. I think I'd be really curious in what what people are thinking, what's resonating, what's not. If not, and the second part is knowing, how might knowing something about how the brain works or how it works differently influence how they ask questions or how they do their sessions differently, if at all. But how much time should we? Here we go. How much time should we give them? 5 minutes?
A bit longer. Let me set up some rooms. How many people?
All right, you're setting up, and I'll
Yeah.
talk. I'm asking myself for my own. If a label is really helpful, does it have to be diagnosis equals illness and disease? Would it be that I just have different personality traits? This is Caroline. And I wonder if they've studied the Myers-Briggs. I don't have an answer to that, but I want to pick up on what Caroline said there, because it's not really a disease anyway, right? It's just that the word diagnosis is associated with disease, but it's a brain type, and that's kind of part of what's part of the problem is conceptualizing it in these disorder, disease, mental mental health terms, because it is a neutral thing. It is just brain plus environment equals outcome, paraphrasing Dr. Luke Bearden, who calls it the golden rule. He relates it to autism, but basically, an ADHD brain is not diseased. It's not an illness, and so if we take out the sting and just go, okay, well, it's just how it's arranged, right? We could see on the EEG that it fires differently. Then the label is no longer a label. It's part of an identity potentially.
It's information, and it can be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So here's some questions. What is a good way to give good education? Which possibilities are successful? What are you going to do after the results of the research? Like, in what way you hope it brings you to solutions? Those are really important points. Thanks, Pascal, for joining us. So, okay, we'll send them out.
Open the rooms.
You're ready to break us, to put people in breakout rooms, and with the question of what's coming. Should we make it quite broad? What's coming up for you? What ideas?
Yeah, we'll throw some questions in the chats. Yeah. What's coming up?
Okay, we'll throw the questions in the chat. That'll help.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, and then I'd be really curious to hear some of the things that came up in your chats, for those of you that feel comfortable sharing.
Okay, we discussed holding space for the client and keeping in mind the way society views them, so that we don't end up coming across in the same way, that we hold space for them. We treat them as a person, whatever, say Kim or whatever or Sue, and not their diagnosis. And depending, I mean, it's a tricky thing, because some people will say, oh, well, do the narrative thing, externalize it, or rename it as something outside of themselves, which you can, if you can tell the client's okay with that. But if the client owns it as a part of who they are, as part of their identity, then you just got to hold space for that and accept them for who they are and what they bring to the table. And you might have to, tailor your solution-focused questions in a way that they can understand and they can resonate with it.
Thanks, Liz.
And just to add on to that, also the question of, okay, the externalizing the problem, is neurodivergence a problem? Is it something to be externalized, or is it an important part of who someone is that might have key things but has incredible strengths? And so from a solution-focused lens, how do we create conversations that invite the strengths of your unique brain wiring, and in what context do those strengths really thrive?
Amazing. Thanks, Kim.
For me, as a therapist, I was diagnosed in like 1994. So before that, there was a whole lot of information, before there was a real understanding of what it looked like in women. And as a clinician, I specialized in working with women diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And part of what I was able to bring to that I think made me so very successful was having spent so much of my life in so many contexts feeling like and being treated as a defective horse, that I came in with the assumption that how I may be experiencing somebody may not be how they're experiencing themselves. And I need to find out how they're experiencing themselves, because that's where we're going to find leverage. That's where we're going to find strengths and openings and curiosities and the ability to do things differently. And I became very committed to being very strength-based because these people came into my office with no connections to their strengths, no connections to how they had survived and how they were making the best choices of the choices that they could see. But I think it gave me a humility that made me really successful with people who had been deemed chronic treatment failures.
Thank you so much, Laura. That really hits. It's such an important thing, and it's really good to have those examples, those experiences. What's reminding me of what I've noticed in clients as well is that sometimes having that explicit lens or having that explicit framing also might give permission to describe a preferred future that doesn't look like anybody else's, right? So very often I've heard best hopes that are like, I just want to be more organized. And I know we're not taking that as the thing, but sometimes just being able to know that, yeah, no, that's actually neither likely to be happening nor particularly desirable for anybody. It's really boring. So being able to perhaps describe a preferred future more freely without that mask, once the client knows that, oh yeah, no, instead of perhaps describing a preferred future where I've woken up after a full night's sleep, knowing that, oh no, on this day I'm going to get up at 3 a.m. because I will be starting it at that time, and that's just how my brain works, kind of thing. Thanks. Hetty has their hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes. Well, I have to be a little bit of warm up for all the language and the fast words. But well, what I see in the comments is a lot of questions. But I think it's the most important thing is that the day you get a diagnosis, the morning after, you're still the same person. And I know that from myself, but I also know that from the clients I work with. And what I missed 12 years ago is a good psychoeducation, because I get the results and they ask me from what do you want to learn or what do you want to say, but I was just a little bit flabbergasted. I grieve at that same moment, and I was really happy to think I'm not crazy, I'm not a horse. I heard the word, but then I went reading a lot of books, and all the books are about ADHD are about problem focused. And then after a year, I start solution focused therapy on Korzybski in Belgium. And then I find out the solution is in me, in my own body and in my own brain. And today I work a lot with professionals, but also with families. And I give psychoeducation with ping pong balls, with teaspoons, and with macaroni pasta. So it's very visualizing. And the first thing I ask, one example is I get a bowl of water with 13 ping pong balls in it. And I ask, would you like to, with one hand, you put the balls down under? And I'm a naughty girl, so there are two, how do you say it? There are a lot of balls in it for the hand, and the balls are pumping up. And then I ask the question, what is your experience and how do you make a translation to ADHD? Because the people I work with all know what ADHD is. And then they are going to think about their solution and how they are looking at ADHD. And then I can feel that information, or we can feel that information. And I do it with, I have got 3 or 4, how do you say, interventions with this stuff, and then I see the light is shining on the people. So I think there are more solution. We can find solution in more creativity and psychoeducation, because visualizing is so very important than instead of an online program or a book you can read. Because when I'm with clients and they ask me, can I learn about ADHD? Well, I don't have to read a book. That's not my work, but my work is to stand together with my client and go that way to better future. Yes, I hope my language was clear.
Yeah, it was very clear, and so clear that we're now all wanting to know about the macaroni pasta. So hold that macaroni pasta thought, because Gaia also wanted to say something. So we'll give Gaia a chance, but then we're coming back to hear about the pasta.
In true ADHD style, like, it's sort of exited my brain, but I think it's just interesting because I come from a team of people, you know, about 3 or 4 out of 5 of us that have ADHD, and so and one who has autism as well. And it's just really interesting, the conversation about neurodiversity. It's not really we don't have a negative label associated with it. It's just part of our identity, and because of that, we're able to just openly discuss, oh, that's this, and we each have our own skills in certain areas, and it's just, yeah, it's just really refreshing to sort of think like that. And coming into here, actually, it was just funny for me to sort of think, oh, of course, yeah, there's still stigmatized space where conversations about ADHD aren't sort of still accepted, that maybe that's the wrong word, or stigmatized. But I guess the other thing is kind of what's been hinted to already. I would want, as a client receiving solution-focused therapy, for ADHD to be part of the awareness of the person doing the approach to me, so to speak. And so, yeah, in that, very much in the light of treating the client as the expert, I guess we just have to adapt to each client.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah, I love
a
that,
question
Gaia,
that pops up. Sorry, Sue, go.
Go ahead. No, you.
A question that pops up is it ever okay to bring it up as a practitioner? That I've also grappled with as someone who is an SF practitioner and also diagnoses ADHD, you know, that hat dance. Sue, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, throw that out for people to either answer in the chat or speak up. But for me, just sort of building on what Guy was just saying about, you know, I'd want them to know about it. It makes a huge difference to me knowing about how my brain works and the kind of the realisticness. So we talk about best hopes, and then we talk about preferred future, and everybody goes with this description. So suppose you woke up in the morning and be, oh, I'd leap out of bed and it'd be lovely and sunny, and I'd journal for whatever, and I'd make a lovely cup of tea and it'd be all glorious. That is not how my mornings go at all. That is never how my mornings are ever going to go. Because that's a dream that we talk about. That's kind of like creating a dream in a neurodivergent world of expectation. Whereas a best hope for me would be knowing that I went to bed at 3 a.m. because I had something that I was hyper-focusing on the night before and I was stressing about today, and knowing that I only got 2.5 hours sleep. Realistically, how am I going to be at my best given all of these things and the lens and the information? And so in true ADHD fashion, I've forgotten what we started with the question, but, you know, for me, helping to have, as we say, helping to have best hopes and a preferred future description that fits with who we are and how we go about doing life. You know, I'm a night owl. You know, I may not go to bed I didn't go to bed till 3 last night. I messaged Amici at 3. She picked it up, you know, 10 minutes later at 5 o'clock her time, and she was awake. You know, I don't hold it against her, and she doesn't hold it against me. You know, it's that kind of people, oh, well, you must get up early and you must do these things. But so making something a real hope and a real future in the sphere of our own functioning and the context that we live in, rather than having dreams based on a brain I don't have. Because when I'm trying to make things work in a neurotypical way, or I'm trying to fit the expectations, I'm constantly being a failed horse. And so so this thing about, is it ever okay to bring it up? You know, when this first came up, in a conversation with me. It's like, oh my God, help. If I'd have known for the first 55 years of my life what I've known for the last 3 years of my life, oh no, wait, that's not even the right age. I'd see, I can't even do the maths. But you know, then I'd have gone about it with a lot more compassion and a lot more understanding of how to do the best me. Yeah. And also being able to extrapolate those strengths. Yeah, no, I'll come back to that as another point, but let's hear from somebody else. Where are we going? Pout's off to get ready. Thank you, Pout.
There are a couple of
Asking permission to ask. Yes.
interesting, yes, comments. Maybe it's about asking permission to ask, and I love that. I was also thought that like asking, yeah, like is there something about how your brain works, or you know, is there something else that's important to know? I don't necessarily have the answer. I can share that I have also gotten it really wrong before, where I've run a session and it was all muddled up, and the client quite rightfully did not come back, and they were confused, I was confused. So not, it doesn't always go well when perhaps there isn't that clarity, like what is this? Is this a solution-focused session? Like what are we figuring out best hopes? Are we looking from this lens or from this lens? So definitely I'm not, you know, the complete authority on that, because sometimes it just doesn't work, or it's not helpful if that's not coming from the client. So that question of maybe it's about asking permission is actually, I really like that. Have a pre-question to see if I'm open to talking about it. Feel less defensive when it comes up. Yes. And then Jofia might explore stuff that I know to be tendencies for zebras and ask, does this resonate with you? Yes. Yes. Might open up a good possibility-driven conversation if you just throw around some potential zebra traits, right? Kind of like in the same way that we might ask, okay, so are you a person who wakes up with an alarm clock or with the birds or whatever? And are you a person who does? And I'm thinking of the kinds of things that might be different, like you know, that are you a person who starts things at the beginning, from the beginning to the end, or you like to jump in the middle, or the consistency versus inconsistency part as well. We could have a great session, and in fact, Sue and I experience that quite a bit, where we'd have a great session, such a beautiful, super detailed preferred future description, which you'd think, oh wow, and then that had absolutely no resemblance in what happened afterwards, because what we described, either it was a great idea but not rooted in reality, in you know, our realities, or there were bits and pieces missing, right? Because both Sue and I are really great at talking about and imagining and explaining, and not so great about taking it from here into the, oh, okay, so is it now actually going to be happening? Because there might be a piece missing, like okay, someone else needs to be there, or some kind of system, some kind of tool that would take it from up here into this part. We need to wrap up.
We do. I'm just going to quickly, oh, hold on, let me close the breakout room thing. I'm just going to very quickly just share the screen as summary and say that if anyone wants to hang out in a, you know, I'm not in a, oh, is that showing? There we go. That's kind of like the, did we do it? We've talked about it a bit. We wanted a conversation and we think we've had one. Yeah, happy to, you know, pick up or hang out in a coffee room at some point later during the day and pick up on conversations about you know, what, how and when, anything else. Other than that, any last comments before we wrap up? We need to finish our session now. Last questions, comments. Thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We thought we want to have a fun conversation about something that we're both passionate about, with people who are interested, and we did that. I wish it could go on, but that's part of the reality too. There's so many other really fun conversations to be had. So hopefully we can pick this up at some point. And otherwise, we'll see you either in coffee room or in another session.
Okay, I'm going to stop
Thanks so
recording
much.
and hope it all works. Thank you so much.